I never thought I'd find myself in a legal battle over a parking spot, but life has a way of surprising you. The day Barbara Montgomery, our notorious HOA president, blocked my SUV with her sleek Mercedes and declared my designated parking spot her new executive space, was the day my quiet suburban life in Maple Ridge, Arizona, turned into a battlefield. My name is Ethan Parker, and I've lived in Sycamore Estates for 5 years. It's a beautiful community of 78 homes nestled against the backdrop of the Sonoran Desert. The houses here are tasteful stucco constructions with terracotta roofs, and the property values have steadily climbed since I purchased my 3-bedroom home. I'm a freelance software developer, which means I spend more time at home than most of my neighbors, watching the daily drama of our community unfold from my home office window. Barbara Montgomery moved in 3 years ago and immediately ran for HOA president. No one opposed her. Most of us were too busy with our own lives to bother with HOA politics. That was our first mistake. Within months, she had rewritten half the community guidelines and instituted a system of fines that seemed designed to fill the HOA coffers rather than improve our community. I managed to stay under her radar for the most part. I kept my lawn meticulously groomed, never left my trash cans out past collection day, and always submitted my exterior modification requests in triplicate, as per Barbara's new streamlined process. But then came the parking dispute. "Mr. Parker, that space is now reserved for HOA executive use," Barbara announced that fateful Tuesday morning in April. She was a woman in her mid-50s with highlighted blonde hair cut in a precise bob, wearing white capri pants and a pastel pink polo shirt with the collar turned up. I had just returned from my morning coffee run to find her Mercedes blocking my assigned spot, the one directly in front of my home that I'd been using since I moved in. "Barbara, this is my assigned space. It's in my deed," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. She gave me that smile I'd seen her use at HOA meetings right before she shot down someone's request to install solar panels or plant non-approved native vegetation. The board voted last night to reassign certain premium spots for official HOA business. You can park in visitor parking from now on. She gestured toward the lot at the far end of our street, a good 3-minute walk from my front door. "You can't just vote away something that's in my property deed," I protested. Barbara's smile tightened. "Actually, we can. Check the HOA bylaws, Section 27B. The board has authority to reallocate common areas for the benefit of the community." She handed me a freshly laminated notice that she'd obviously prepared in anticipation of my objection. I took the paper, noticing that she'd gone to the trouble of using the HOA letterhead and official seal. "This isn't a common area. This is deeded to me." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," she said with that condescending tone I'd heard her use with Mrs. Abernathy when the elderly woman dared to hang bird feeders in her backyard. "All exterior spaces are subject to HOA jurisdiction." "I'll need to see the board minutes on this decision," I said. "They'll be posted on the community portal within 30 days, as per our standard procedure," she replied. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have important HOA matters to attend to." As she walked away, her sandals clicking on the pavement, I knew this wasn't going to be the end of it. I moved my car to the visitor lot and spent the rest of the morning searching through my closing documents from when I purchased the house. After an hour of digging through folders, I found what I was looking for: the property deed clearly indicating that parking space 37 was exclusively deeded to my property. I printed the relevant section, highlighted the parking space clause, and walked over to Barbara's house that same afternoon. Her home was the largest model in our community, with potted topiary flanking the entrance and a blessed sign hanging above her door. When she answered, her expression immediately soured. "Mr. Parker, this is not a good time." "I just wanted to show you this," I said, handing her the highlighted deed page. "The parking space is legally mine. It's not a common area." She barely glanced at the document. "This is an outdated version. The HOA has since amended the property classifications." Now I have a charity luncheon to prepare for. "Barbara, you can't amend a deed without the property owner's consent," I insisted. "File a formal complaint if you must, but the decision stands." She closed the door in my face. That evening, I took to the community Facebook group to see if anyone else had experienced similar issues. Within an hour, my post had over 30 comments. It seemed Barbara had been on a power trip for months, approving her friends' modification requests while denying others for identical changes, selectively enforcing rules, and even accessing people's backyards without notice to inspect for violations. Patricia Thomason, a real estate attorney who lived 4 doors down, commented, "Ethan, what she's doing with your parking space is illegal. The HOA cannot override deeded property rights. I'm happy to look at your documents if you want." I'd only spoken to Patricia a few times at community gatherings. She was a single mom with twin teenage daughters and always seemed harried but kind. I sent her a private message, and she invited me over the next evening. Patricia's home was warm and lived in, with law books sharing shelf space with young adult novels and soccer trophies. She wore jeans and a Northwestern law sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was nothing like the perfectly coiffed Barbara Montgomery. "So, show me what we're working with," she said after offering me a cup of coffee. I laid out my deed, the HOA bylaws I'd printed from our community portal, and Barbara's laminated notice. Patricia read through everything carefully, occasionally making notes. After 20 minutes, she looked up with a slight smile. "This is pretty clear-cut, Ethan. Your deed explicitly grants you ownership of that parking space. The HOA has no legal right to reassign it. So what do I do?" "First, we send a formal letter citing the relevant property law and demanding they restore your parking rights immediately. If they ignore that, we file for injunctive relief with the county court." She took a sip of her coffee. "But something tells me this isn't just about a parking space." I sighed. Barbara's been running this place like her personal kingdom. The monthly HOA fees have increased twice since she took over, but the services have decreased. The community pool hours were cut. The landscaping company was replaced with a cheaper one that barely shows up, and she's installed cameras around the community without a proper vote. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "Cameras? Where's the funding for that coming from?" "That's another thing." The financial reports have been vague lately, just summary totals without itemization. Patricia's expression grew serious. "You know, I've been so busy with work that I haven't paid much attention to the HOA drama. But what you're describing sounds like potential mismanagement, maybe even fraud." "I'm not the only one who's noticed," I said, "but anyone who speaks up gets hit with violation notices and fines." Patricia closed her notepad. "Let me draft that letter tonight. In the meantime, document everything, take pictures of your parking space, save all communications with Barbara or the HOA board, and keep a log of any other suspicious activities." The next morning, I found a violation notice on my front door citing unapproved window coverings with a $150 fine. My blinds had been the same since I moved in and had passed multiple inspections. This was clearly retaliation for my pushback on the parking issue. I took photos of the notice and my blinds, then texted Patricia. She advised me to ignore the fine for now, we'd address it in our response letter. By that afternoon, she had emailed me a draft of a forceful but professional letter asserting my property rights and demanding the immediate cessation of harassment. After my approval, she printed it on her firm's letterhead, and we delivered it to Barbara's doorstep together. Barbara wasn't home, so we left it in her mailbox and took a date-stamped photo as proof of delivery. The response came faster than we expected. The next morning, the entire HOA board was standing in my driveway when I returned from my run. Besides Barbara, there was Kevin Walsh, a retired accountant, Deanne Friedman, who ran the local boutique, and Mike Stevens, Barbara's neighbor and apparent lackey. "Mr. Parker," Barbara began, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold, "the board would like to discuss this misunderstanding about the parking situation." "It's not a misunderstanding," I replied, still catching my breath from my run. "My deed clearly states, community needs evolve," Kevin interrupted. "The bylaws give us flexibility to adapt." "Not when it comes to deeded property," I countered. Barbara stepped forward. "We're willing to reduce your monthly HOA fee by 10% in exchange for the parking space reassignment." I nearly laughed. "You're offering me a discount on fees you arbitrarily increased last year in exchange for taking my property. No thanks." "We're trying to be reasonable here," Deanne added with a frown. "Reasonable would be respecting my property rights," I said. "And dropping the bogus violation notice about my window coverings." The board members exchanged glances. Mike cleared his throat. "About that notice, we've decided to rescind it as a gesture of goodwill." "Great," I replied. "And my parking space?" Barbara's smile disappeared. "That decision stands. The board voted unanimously." "Then we have nothing more to discuss until you've responded to my attorney's letter," I said, walking past them toward my front door. "You're making a mistake, Parker," Barbara called after me. "This community operates on cooperation." I turned back. "No, it operates on laws and property rights, and you've violated both." Over the next 2 weeks, the situation escalated. My garbage wasn't collected, though everyone else's was. I received 3 more violation notices for increasingly absurd infractions: excessive walking on community sidewalks, improper mail retrieval technique, and my personal favorite, discourteous nodding to neighbors. Patricia helped me document everything while working on our legal strategy. She had begun researching the HOA's financial records and discovered some troubling patterns. "Ethan, have you seen the landscaping invoices from last year?" she asked one evening as we sat at my dining room table surrounded by papers. "No, those aren't posted on the portal." She slid a document toward me. "I requested them directly from the county records. The HOA is paying $9,500 monthly to Montgomery Landscaping Services. Any relation to our dear president, do you think?" I stared at the paper. "She's funneling HOA money to her own company." "That's straight-up embezzlement." "It gets better," Patricia continued. "The security camera system was purchased from Secure Home Solutions, which is registered to Michael Stevens, our board member Mike." "This is unbelievable," I muttered. "How have they gotten away with this?" "Most homeowners don't pay attention until something directly affects them," Patricia explained. "And Barbara's been careful to keep the individual transactions just under the threshold that would require a community vote." With this new information, our strategy shifted. Patricia suggested we gather more evidence before confronting the board again. We needed bank statements, board meeting minutes, and contractor bids that had been rejected in favor of board members' companies. Through the community grapevine, we connected with a former board treasurer who had resigned 6 months earlier. Janet Collins had moved to a neighboring community, but was still in touch with friends in Sycamore Estates. I tried to question the spending patterns, Janet told us when we met at a coffee shop outside our community. Barbara said I was being obstructionist and pushed me out, but I kept copies of everything. Janet handed over a flash drive with 2 years of financial records. I was waiting for someone to finally stand up to her, she said with a smile. Good luck. The documents were damning. Not only had Barbara and the board been steering contracts to their own businesses, but they had also been collecting consulting fees for services never rendered. The parking space reassignment was part of a larger plan to create premium spots that would be leased to visitors for events at the clubhouse, with the revenue going directly into a separate account controlled by Barbara. Armed with this evidence, Patricia suggested we take it to the county prosecutor's office, but I had another idea first. Let's call an emergency community meeting, I proposed. Present everything to the homeowners and let them decide how to proceed. This affects all of us. Patricia agreed, and we sent out notices to every home in the community, carefully citing the HOA bylaw that allowed for emergency meetings when requested by at least 15% of homeowners. We easily gathered the required signatures within a day. Barbara tried to block the meeting, claiming improper notice, but too many homeowners were now paying attention. The meeting was set for Wednesday evening at the community clubhouse. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. I had never seen so many of my neighbors in one place. Barbara and the board sat at the front table, looking nervous as more than 60 homeowners filled the seats and lined the walls. This meeting is unauthorized, Barbara began, tapping her gavel, and therefore any business conducted will not be recognized by the board. Patricia stood up. According to Bylaw 15.3, which I have copies of for anyone interested, this meeting is perfectly legitimate. Now, my client Ethan Parker has some information to share with the community. I walked to the front, trying to calm my nerves. Public speaking had never been my forte, but righteous anger propelled me forward. For the past 3 weeks, I've been fighting to keep a parking space that is legally deeded to my property, I began. What started as a simple property dispute led to something much bigger. With the help of Patricia Thomason and former board treasurer Janet Collins, I've uncovered evidence of financial misconduct by our current HOA board. Barbara tried to interrupt, but the crowd shouted her down. I continued, methodically laying out the evidence: the self-dealing contracts, the unauthorized fees, the misappropriation of funds. Patricia displayed key documents on the clubhouse projector as I spoke. When I finished, the room erupted. Homeowners were shouting questions, demanding resignations, and calling for legal action. Barbara repeatedly banged her gavel, but no one was listening to her anymore. Thomas Weaver, a retired judge who lived on the corner, called for an immediate vote to remove the current board. The motion was seconded by at least a dozen voices. Patricia quickly outlined the procedure according to our bylaws. The vote wasn't even close. The entire board was removed 58-4, with only Barbara's closest friends dissenting. An interim board was elected on the spot, with Janet Collins returning as treasurer, Thomas Weaver as president, and to my surprise, myself as vice president. Barbara stormed out before the meeting ended, followed by the other disgraced board members. The new interim board's first motion was to restore all improperly reassigned parking spaces and to conduct a full financial audit. The next morning, I parked my car in space 37 with immense satisfaction. But our work was far from over. The financial audit revealed even more extensive mismanagement than we'd initially discovered. Barbara and the board had diverted nearly $175,000 of HOA funds over 2 years. The interim board, with legal guidance from Patricia, voted to pursue both civil and criminal charges. The county prosecutor's office was particularly interested in the case, as they'd been receiving similar complaints from other nearby communities. Barbara didn't go quietly. She hired an aggressive attorney who claimed she had acted within her authority and that all contracts had been properly approved by the board. But the paper trail was too clear, and her defense crumbled when Mike Stevens agreed to testify against her in exchange for leniency. 3 months after our showdown at the community meeting, Barbara Montgomery pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution to our HOA. The day after her sentencing, I received a text from Patricia. "Check your mailbox." Inside was a small box containing a custom keychain with a miniature deed attached. The tiny print, visible under magnification, was the exact clause from my property deed specifying my ownership of parking space 37. "Thought you deserved a trophy," the note read. "Dinner tomorrow to celebrate." I smiled and texted back an immediate yes. What had started with a parking dispute had exposed corruption, brought our community together, and apparently kindled something between Patricia and me that went beyond a lawyer-client relationship. 6 months later, Sycamore Estates had transformed. With Janet Collins overseeing our finances and Thomas Weaver leading the board with transparency, our community funds were being properly managed. The embezzled money had been recovered and invested in actual improvements. The pool was open longer hours. The landscaping was thriving, and community events were bringing neighbors together who had previously only nodded at each other in passing. Patricia and I had been dating steadily, discovering that we had much more in common than just a disdain for corrupt HOA practices. Her twins, Emma and Olivia, had even started calling me the parking spot hero, which I found both embarrassing and endearing. One evening, as we sat on my patio watching the desert sunset, Patricia brought up something unexpected. "You know, this whole HOA battle has got me thinking," she said, sipping her wine. "There are probably countless other communities dealing with similar issues. Most homeowners don't know their rights or how to fight back." I nodded. "It's intimidating. If you hadn't helped me, I might have just given up and parked in visitor parking forever." "Exactly," she said, her eyes lighting up with that look I'd come to recognize as her "I have an idea" face. "What if we started a consultancy, helping homeowners and HOAs work together legally and ethically, like HOA mediators? More than that, we could offer legal education for homeowners, governance training for board members, financial oversight systems. Help prevent the kind of situation we went through." I considered it. My freelance software work was steady but not particularly fulfilling, and I had discovered during this process that I actually enjoyed community organizing and problem solving. I could develop software for HOA financial transparency, I suggested. Something that makes it easy for homeowners to see where their money is going. Patricia grinned. "See, you're already thinking like a consultant." By the end of the evening, we had sketched out a business plan for what would become Clear Title Consulting, specializing in HOA governance and homeowner rights. Our first client was, ironically, our own community. The new board hired us to rewrite the bylaws to prevent future abuses of power and establish clear financial controls. From there, word spread to neighboring communities. A year after Barbara Montgomery had tried to steal my parking space, Patricia and I were running a successful consulting business serving HOA communities across Arizona. The irony wasn't lost on us that Barbara's power grab had ultimately led to a career change for both of us, one that was helping other homeowners stand up for their rights. Our relationship had deepened as well. Working together had shown us how well we complemented each other, my technical mindset balanced by her legal expertise, her intensity softened by my more laid-back approach. The twins had fully embraced me as part of their lives, even convincing me to coach their soccer team despite my limited knowledge of the sport. We had formed an unexpected family unit that felt more right than anything I'd experienced before. As for parking space 37, it remained a symbol in our community. The new board had installed a small plaque nearby that read, "Where one homeowner's stand against injustice began a community transformation." It was a bit dramatic for my taste, but it served as a reminder that standing up for what's right, even in seemingly small matters, can lead to significant change. Barbara was released from prison after serving 14 months of her sentence. She moved to a gated community in another state, hopefully one with a more ethical HOA board. We occasionally heard updates about her through the real estate grapevine. Apparently, she was keeping a low profile and not volunteering for any community positions. The experiences with our HOA had transformed not just my career and personal life, but also my understanding of community. Before, I had been content to mind my own business, stay out of neighborhood politics, and keep to myself. Now, I recognized that communities thrive when members are engaged, vigilant, and willing to work together. Clear Title Consulting grew steadily over the next year. Patricia eventually left her law firm to manage it full-time, while I balanced software development with our growing client list. We specialized in communities that had experienced mismanagement or fraud, helping them rebuild governance systems and restore trust among homeowners. One case particularly stood out. A community in Scottsdale had been under the thumb of an HOA president who made Barbara look like an amateur. Gerald Hoffman had been president for 11 years and had systematically rewritten bylaws to eliminate term limits, give himself sole discretion over contracts, and even create a special assessment that directly funded his president's discretionary account. When homeowners Nancy and Robert Keller contacted us after receiving a $5,000 fine for planting unapproved roses in their backyard, we discovered a pattern of abuse that dwarfed what we'd experienced. Gerald had installed his family members in paid HOA positions, awarded contracts exclusively to businesses that gave him kickbacks, and even used HOA funds to renovate his own home under the guise of a model property improvement program. With our help, the Kellers organized their neighbors and gathered evidence. Unlike our situation, Gerald refused to step down even when confronted with proof of his misdeeds. The case went to court, where Patricia's expert testimony about HOA governance standards helped secure an injunction removing Gerald and his cronies from power. The judge in that case, impressed by our systematic approach to HOA reform, referred 3 other troubled communities to us. Soon we were hiring staff and opening a proper office in downtown Phoenix. 2 years after the parking space incident, I found myself standing in that very spot late one evening, reflecting on how much had changed. The community around me was thriving under transparent leadership. Neighbors knew each other by name and worked together on community projects. The property values had increased by an average of 12%, since the financial mismanagement had been addressed. I was pulled from my thoughts by Patricia's car pulling into her driveway. She had moved into the house directly across from mine 6 months earlier, when it came on the market, a convenience for both our relationship and our business collaboration. Deep thoughts in the parking space. she teased as she walked over, briefcase in hand. Just appreciating how one small battle turned into all of this, I replied, gesturing around us. She smiled and took my hand. Ready for another battle? The Sunridge Valley case goes to court tomorrow. Always, I said, squeezing her hand, but maybe we can enjoy a quiet evening first. The twins are at their dad's, right? They are, she confirmed. And I brought home those blueprints you wanted to look at. The blueprints were for a new office building we were considering purchasing for our expanding business. What had started as a two-person consultancy was now a firm with 12 employees specializing in HOA governance, homeowner rights, and community management software. Later that evening, as we reviewed the blueprints spread across her dining room table, Patricia paused and looked up at me. You know what I realized today? 2 years ago, I was buried in corporate law cases I didn't care about, and you were writing code for companies you never even spoke to. Now we're actually making a difference in people's daily lives. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. All because Barbara Montgomery couldn't stand the idea of walking an extra 20 feet from visitor parking. Patricia laughed. The butterfly effect of petty tyranny. I should send her a thank you card in prison, I joked. Maybe name a conference room after her in the new building. Patricia suggested with a mischievous grin. The Montgomery Memorial Room for Ethical Governance Training. We both laughed, but there was truth beneath the humor. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes if you're willing to stand your ground and fight for what's right. The next day, as we presented our case against another corrupt HOA board in county court, I caught Patricia's eye across the courtroom. She gave me that small, confident smile that I'd first seen when she assured me we could win the battle for my parking space. We had won that first skirmish, and in the process, discovered a mission that was bigger than either of us had imagined. What started with a stolen parking spot had evolved into a movement for homeowner empowerment and HOA accountability across the state. After court, as we walked to our cars, Patricia linked her arm through mine. I've been thinking about expansion, she said. There are HOA horror stories like ours in every state. We could franchise the model, create a national network of advocates. The idea was both exciting and daunting. That's a big leap from fighting over parking space 37, I replied. But it started there, she reminded me. Sometimes the smallest injustices reveal the biggest problems and lead to the most meaningful solutions. I couldn't argue with that logic. Our experience had shown us that HOA abuses were systemic, not isolated, and that most homeowners lacked the knowledge and resources to effectively challenge them. That evening, we hosted a community cookout in Sycamore Estates' newly renovated park area, another improvement made possible by properly managed HOA funds. As I grilled burgers and chatted with neighbors who had become friends, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out if I had simply accepted Barbara's parking space power grab. Thomas Weaver, still serving as our HOA president, raised his glass in a toast. To good neighbors and transparent governance. Everyone cheered, and in that moment I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond winning a legal battle or building a successful business. We had helped create a true community, one where people looked out for each other and worked together for the common good. After the cookout, Patricia and I walked hand in hand back to our homes, stopping at parking space 37. It had become something of a tradition for us to pause there and reflect on our journey. You know, Patricia said thoughtfully, if we do expand nationally, we should make this spot our company logo. A simple parking space outline with the number 37 inside. It's not exactly a corporate power symbol, I laughed. No, but it represents everything we stand for: property rights, community empowerment, standing up to bullies, and the idea that one person can make a difference. Put that way, it made perfect sense. From that spot, we had launched a movement that was improving lives across our state, with the potential to go much further. 3 years to the day after Barbara Montgomery tried to claim my parking space, Clear Title Consulting opened its first satellite office in neighboring Nevada. Patricia and I cut the ribbon together, surrounded by our growing team and clients who had become advocates themselves. The company logo, prominently displayed on the building facade, was exactly as Patricia had suggested: a simple outline of a parking space with the number 37 inside. Beneath it, our company motto, "Standing our ground for homeowner rights." As we celebrated this milestone, I received a text message from Janet Collins with a news link. Barbara Montgomery had completed her probation and was speaking out about HOA reform, claiming to have seen the light during her incarceration. She was advocating for transparency laws and term limits for board members. I showed the article to Patricia, who raised an eyebrow. Redemption or opportunism, she wondered. Maybe both, I replied. Either way, if she's actually helping the cause now, that's one more voice on the right side. Patricia nodded, then raised her champagne glass. To parking space 37, may it continue to inspire positive change. I clinked my glass against hers. And to standing up for what's right, no matter how small it seems at the time. What began with a parking dispute had evolved into a mission, a business, a relationship, and ultimately a movement that was changing how communities govern themselves. All because I refused to give up a space that was rightfully mine, and because Patricia had the expertise and courage to help me fight for it. As we mingled with guests at our office opening, a reporter from the local paper asked me what advice I would give to homeowners facing similar struggles with their HOAs. Know your rights, I said without hesitation. Read your deed, understand the bylaws, and remember that HOA boards serve the community, not the other way around. And most importantly, don't fight alone, connect with your neighbors, because chances are, if you're experiencing a problem, others are too. The reporter nodded, jotting down my response. And is it true that this all started with a dispute over a parking space? I smiled, thinking about how far we had come from that confrontation with Barbara 3 years ago. The smallest rights matter, I replied. Because when we surrender them, we open the door to losing bigger ones. As the event wound down and we prepared to head home, Patricia pulled me aside near the new building's entrance. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her purse. She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a key, a real one, not a symbolic keychain this time. "What's this for?" I asked, turning it over in my palm. "My house," she said simply. "Or yours, or maybe a new one altogether. The point is, I think it's time we shared more than just a business and a cause." I looked at her, this brilliant, passionate woman who had entered my life because of a petty parking dispute, and knew with complete certainty that Barbara Montgomery's power play had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of my life. "I think you're right," I said, pulling her close. "Though I'm rather attached to having parking space 37 right outside my front door." Patricia laughed. "We'll figure it out. We're pretty good at resolving property disputes after all." As we drove home that evening, back to Sycamore Estates and the parking space that had changed everything, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. What could have been a simple annoyance had instead become the catalyst for profound change in our community, in our careers, and in our personal lives. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about the principle of the thing. Sometimes it's about discovering who you are and what you're capable of when pushed to defend what's rightfully yours. In my case, parking space 37 had led me to purpose, partnership, and a new definition of home. And as I pulled into that very space later that night, I couldn't help but think that Barbara Montgomery, for all her flaws and misdeeds, had inadvertently set me on the path to where I was meant to be all along.